Karen yanked my sister from her car. She had no idea my sister's a federal agent. There's an unspoken rule in our town: don't mess with strangers unless you know who they are. Karen didn't get that memo. She calls herself the Neighborhood Safety Director of Cedar Glen Estates. It's not a title that exists, but that hasn't stopped her from putting it on flyers, wearing a badge she printed at home, and patrolling our cul-de-sac like she's Homeland Security. I'm Anthony Reyes, 32, born and raised in this town. Moved back after 8 years in DORC to take care of Mom when her Parkinson's got worse. I'm a licensed therapist working from home, trying to keep things quiet for her sake. Karen didn't like that I didn't attend the HOA meetings. We don't actually have an HOA, just a few power-hungry residents who act like we do. She didn't like that I parked in my own driveway facing the wrong direction. She didn't like that my front lawn was native plants instead of turf. But most of all, she didn't like my sister. Jules is 35. She's calm, brilliant, and never raises her voice. She's also a senior federal field agent assigned to interagency liaison work. Off duty, she looks like any other woman: bomber jacket, jeans, aviators, and a clipped badge inside a lanyard she doesn't show unless necessary. That Friday morning, she came to visit after months away, parked her SUV on the curb outside my house. We were inside making coffee when we heard the commotion. "Ma'am, you're in violation. Get out of the vehicle." Then bang, the sound of a car door being flung open and someone hitting the pavement. I ran outside and stopped cold. Karen had yanked Jules from the SUV, and Jules was already standing, dusting off her sleeve, her expression unreadable. Karen was red-faced and panting. "This is a restricted residential zone," Karen barked. "You are not authorized to idle here. You ignored repeated HOA notices. You're under citizen's arrest for trespassing and noncompliance." "You touched me," Jules said evenly. "And you are not law enforcement." Karen waved a laminated printout. "This document gives me full authority under neighborhood statutes, Section 7B, vehicular conformity." Jules glanced at it once and smiled. Cold. "That's not real," she said. "And you just committed felony assault on a federal employee." Karen froze. Then she laughed. "Nice bluff. You people always think you can flash a fake badge and scare us." "You think I'm bluffing?" Jules asked. She reached into her jacket and slowly, deliberately, produced a federal ID. Homeland Security Investigations. Karen's knees buckled just a little. "You're under review," Jules said calmly. "You'll be hearing from my office." The crowd that had formed around us, phones out, recording, whispers. One older man said, "Oh my God, that's the Reyes girl. I thought she was in counterintel." Karen stood silent, and then she ran. Full sprint across the street, tripping on the curb, dropping her HOA citation binder into someone's rose bush. Jules turned to me, her face unreadable. "Was that for real, all of it?" I said. She nodded. "We need to talk." And that's when things really began. Jules didn't say much as we walked back inside. She never does. Not when the gears in her head are turning. She sat down at the kitchen table, opened her notepad, and calmly said, "Start from the beginning." So I did. I told her everything. About Karen's flyers, the fake titles, the so-called noise patrol notices she stuffed in everyone's mailbox, the lawn conformity warnings, the $150 parking citation she once left on my windshield despite having zero legal authority. Jules took notes. "She's not just annoying," she said after a while. "She's running a fake regulatory operation. If she's impersonating enforcement, that's criminal. If she's collecting fines, that's fraud." Then she looked at me with that calm, dead serious stare she's used in interviews with suspected arms traffickers. She laid hands on me, and now she's going to wish she hadn't. Word spread fast. By lunchtime, the video was everywhere. My neighbor's daughter had posted the clip on TikTok with the caption, "Karen assaults woman." Not knowing she's Homeland Security, 1 million views, then 3, then 6. Comment sections exploded. She messed around and found out. That's assault. No debate. Imagine thinking your HOA badge outranks federal clearance. Is this real life or an episode of Law and Order? Karen's house went dark. Curtains drawn. Her car disappeared from the driveway. That would have been the end of it if she hadn't doubled down. 2 days later, Jules and I woke up to find certified mail on my doorstep. A thick envelope with the fake HOA's logo on the front. Inside, a typed summons to compliance review. A bill for unauthorized federal parking, $600. And a threat of mandatory HOA arbitration proceedings. All signed by Karen, under the fake title Executive Director, Community Legal Operations, Cedar Glen HOA Oversight Committee. Jules burst out laughing. She's actually trying to fine Homeland Security. Then her smile vanished. This isn't just Karen being petty. This is someone trying to test the limits of civil control. She's not just faking power, she believes she has it. Jules made another call that afternoon. I didn't hear everything, but I caught the words field office, formal complaint, and statutory impersonation. That night, a black SUV rolled up quietly. 2 plainclothes agents got out, briefcases in hand. They weren't here to threaten. They were here to listen. And once Jules laid it all out, they nodded, grimly. This isn't just about one woman, the older agent said. We've seen a rise in civilian impersonators since the pandemic. People using fake HOAs to control neighborhoods. Some of them escalate. Some carry weapons. Karen's unarmed, I offered. For now, he replied. Then Jules opened the binder she'd pulled from the rosebush. They scanned it. Their expressions changed. These aren't just flyers, the younger agent said. They're structured like code enforcement logs. This is patterned after real municipal forms. She's copying real policy, Jules said, to make it look legitimate and mailing it across state lines. The older one added, that makes it a federal issue. That week, we started gathering stories. Jules went door to door, politely introducing herself, asking if anyone had been fined, threatened, or cited by Karen. The floodgates opened. A retired Air Force colonel had been harassed over the color of his flag. A single mom was fined $200 for excessive child noise. A woman with lupus got a warning for unapproved rest furniture. It was a medical recliner on her porch. Each person showed us fake documents. Each one had the same bogus seal, a gold eagle, a fake code section, and Karen's signature. This wasn't petty anymore. It was a pattern, a scheme. Then came the twist. At the bottom of one old citation, Jules spotted something strange. A footer. CC County Enforcement Authority. File HOA 893. That file number rang a bell. Jules pulled up her federal compliance database and searched the number. It wasn't fake. It was real, but not assigned to Karen. It was assigned to a contractor license from a dissolved property development firm. Karen had somehow accessed old government forms and was repurposing them to give her fake HOA the scent of legitimacy. That made it wire fraud, and abuse of access to protected data. It also meant she'd done this before, not just here. I looked at Jules. You think she's done this in other neighborhoods? Jules nodded. We're not the first, but we're going to be the last. The next morning, Jules filed an official referral packet to the Department of Justice in the State Attorney General's office. In it, video evidence, victim statements, copies of fraudulent documents, her personal testimony, and one closing note, Ms. Karen Rutledge. Delaney knowingly impersonated a government official, falsified code enforcement documents, and committed aggravated assault against a federal agent. I am recommending immediate action to prevent further escalation. But Karen had one final card to play. And it wasn't just dirty, it was dangerous. Jules always told me desperation makes people reckless. That's when they do the stupidest things. Karen must have been desperate, because just when we thought she'd gone quiet, the knock came. It was 6:42 a.m. on a Wednesday. Mom was still asleep upstairs. I opened the door and was greeted by a uniformed sheriff's deputy and a clipboard. Anthony Reyes. Yes, you've been reported for harassment, illegal surveillance, and threatening a neighborhood officer. I blinked. A what? The deputy flipped a page. You've allegedly been stalking a member of the HOA council and distributing slanderous materials around the neighborhood? That's when Jules stepped forward behind me, already dressed, already holding her credentials. I need to see the complaint, she said. The deputy hesitated, then handed it over. It was from Karen. It included a photo of me standing on our porch, taken with a telephoto lens, circled in red. The packet included screenshots of our security footage, but doctored to make it look like I had cornered Karen in front of her home. Jules whistled. She's staging retaliation. This is her last-ditch defense play. Can she really do this, I asked. She can try, Jules said, but she just stepped into federal obstruction. The deputy was reasonable. Local law enforcement already had the TikTok video, already knew the story. He made it clear he wasn't there to arrest anyone, just to log the complaint. But still, the damage was done. Karen was trying to shift the narrative, make herself the victim, and she wasn't stopping there. That night, 4 of our neighbors received anonymous letters in the mail, printed on the same Gold Eagle stationery. They accused Jules of being an imposter agent conducting illegal surveillance under a false Homeland Security badge, and warned them not to speak to her without legal counsel present. One neighbor, a shy single dad, brought his letter to us with trembling hands. She's threatening to report me to CPS if I talk to you again, he whispered. Jules read the letter, looked at me, and said, this isn't just about ego anymore. She's cornered, and she's trying to burn the whole street with her. We built a plan, Jules, me, and 3 neighbors who had worked in government jobs. We called ourselves the Quiet Committee. We didn't print flyers or hold meetings in the open. Instead, we collected every letter Karen had ever delivered. Photos of her staged HOA signs, which turned out to be copied from another town's PDF manual. Video footage from multiple doorbell cams, one of which caught her forging notices on a folding table in her garage. But the best came from Jules. She'd gone digging into Karen's past using her federal access. Karen had a sealed complaint in another county. 2 years ago, she'd been investigated for running a compliance watch group that fined families in a Florida retirement community under the name Civic Civility Group. That case had been dropped after a local judge ruled the residents didn't want to press charges. She'd moved to our town 3 months later. The next day, Jules set up a town hall, not a fake HOA meeting, not a backdoor ambush, a real open public community event at the library, co-sponsored by the City Mediation Board. Flyers went up, emails were sent. We titled it, Know Your Neighborhood Rights, When HOA Rules Aren't Real. Karen didn't show, but over 60 people did. Jules spoke calmly, firmly. She laid out the evidence, redacted names to protect victims, but clear patterns. She explained the difference between a legitimate HOA and a self-declared authority. She brought up examples from across the country. When she finished, a woman raised her hand. My husband paid her $300 for a fence citation. We were told our home could be seized. Another man stood. She threatened to sue us for painting our mailbox, one woman whispered. She told me not to talk to Anthony, said he was being investigated by federal law enforcement. Then came the loudest voice of the night. She assaulted a federal agent, said a young man in the back. And she's still walking free. Silence followed, until a voice near the front broke it. What do we do now? Jules stepped forward. You file, together, loudly. That week, 33 residents co-signed an official legal complaint to the district attorney, complete with attachments, letters, and video evidence. Jules submitted a federal obstruction referral. I called a friend in the local news. They published a story titled HOA Karen Impersonates Enforcement, Assaults Federal Agent in Suburban Power Grab. The reporter posted the TikTok clip, linked to the complaint. It went viral again. By Friday, it wasn't just neighborhood talk. It was national. Karen finally cracked. She showed up at our house again 2 p.m., unannounced, hair disheveled, eyes wild. I want to talk to your sister, she said. Alone. Jules stood behind me on the porch. You had your chance, she said. Karen took a step forward. I didn't know who you were, she snapped. You didn't care, Jules replied. And now you do. Karen turned away, red in the face, trembling. I was only trying to keep the neighborhood clean, she muttered. People need rules. Jules didn't answer. But I did. We need community, not control. Karen left without another word. It was the last time we ever saw her on the street. But the story wasn't over yet, because justice doesn't stop at exposure. It finishes with accountability. 2 weeks after the community town hall, it finally happened. The warrant was issued early Friday morning, a county sheriff's cruiser, flanked by 2 unmarked black vehicles, rolled up to Karen's house, calm, quiet, no sirens, just the heavy hush of justice settling in. The garage door didn't open. Neighbors peeked through blinds, phones out, dogs barking, and then Karen was let out in handcuffs. No hoodie to hide in, no clipboard, just a faded tracksuit and a blank stare. The charges: impersonation of a public official, harassment forgery, assault of a federal officer, wire fraud, tampering with surveillance property. They read each one aloud before placing her in the car. The DA made sure the statement was public. Jules and I stood on the porch, not gloating, not even smiling, because it wasn't over. Karen may have been in custody, but what she'd stirred up still lingered: mistrust, division, fear. And for some folks in Cedar Glen, the idea of order was still more comforting than truth. The backlash came that night. A Facebook group titled Cedar Glen Against Federal Overreach sprang up like rot under the porch. Posts claimed Karen was being persecuted, that Jules had staged the assault, that this was all a deep state psyop to eliminate neighborhood integrity. I wanted to slam my fist through a wall, but Jules, she leaned back in her chair, cool as ever, and said, "When you expose one tyrant, you uncover 10 cowards who let them thrive." So we went one step further. We launched Neighborhood Watchdog, a local initiative co-founded by me, Jules, and 5 other residents. It had a simple mission: educate people on their housing rights, teach how to identify fake authority, report abuses safely, restore trust through transparency. We didn't want power, we wanted accountability. The group met in person, no secret ballots, no fines, no made-up bylaws. People showed up with their kids, their stories, their pain. For the first time, neighbors saw each other as more than lawn shapes and noise levels. We even invited an actual housing rights lawyer to speak. And at the second meeting, Jules stood up in front of the group, unfolded a single piece of paper, and read aloud a formal letter from the U.S. Department of Justice. Based on documented evidence and official testimony, Ms. Delaney is under federal investigation for multiple violations related to impersonation and obstruction of justice. We commend Agent Reyes for her restraint, professionalism, and commitment to public accountability. Gasps filled the room. The message was clear. This wasn't petty. This was a precedent. But that wasn't the final twist, because the deeper Jules and the DOJ dug, the more they found. Karen hadn't just forged fake documents here. She'd done it in Florida, in Idaho, in Wisconsin. 3 other neighborhoods had been hit by her civic enforcement racket under different names: the Harmony League, Citizens for Quiet, and Fair Streets Alliance. Same methods, same threats, same trauma, but we were the first to fight back and go public. So the DOJ used Cedar Glen as a pilot case to draft new legislation. The Neighborhood Accountability and Transparency Act, a proposed measure requiring public registration of all HOA entities, limitations on fines, and criminal penalties for impersonation of code officials. Jules helped shape that draft. I watched her do it night after night at the kitchen table, her notes covered in red ink, a half-empty mug of chamomile beside her laptop. "Think it'll pass?" I asked once. She nodded. "Maybe not this year, but the fire's lit now." A month after Karen's arrest, the DA offered her a deal. No prison time if she pled guilty to all charges, paid full restitution to all victims across 3 states, and never involved herself in community governance again. She refused, said she was being politically targeted, So the trial date was set, and just like that, the town that once whispered behind blinds was now rallying around benches, banners, and balconies, not for vengeance, but for closure. And then something happened I didn't expect. At the next neighborhood watchdog meeting, Helen, an elderly woman from 2 blocks over, stood up with shaking hands. She'd been silent this whole time. "I paid Karen $400 last year," she said softly, "for having wind chimes." Some gasped. Others went still. "I didn't tell anyone. I thought it was real. I felt ashamed." She looked at Jules. "But you made it safe to talk, and now I want my community back." Someone stood and clapped, then someone else. The whole room rose, and I knew. Right then, Karen hadn't just been a bully. She'd been a mirror. She showed us everything we were too afraid to admit. And by breaking her illusion, Jules had given us all permission to speak. But there was still one chapter left to write: the trial, the sentencing, and what came after the storm settled. The courthouse was packed. Reporters, locals, even a few folks from out of state who'd followed the story online. Karen sat at the defendant's table in a gray blazer, hair pulled tight, lips pursed like she was holding back a scream. But she wasn't in control anymore. The state called victim after victim: a retired colonel who'd been fined for his flag, a teenager who was chased off his skateboard for unsafe movement, a widow who'd paid $200 after Karen threatened to report her porch furniture. And then Jules took the stand. She didn't make it about herself. She made it about all of us. She used false authority to intimidate people who didn't know the law. She counted on silence. And when she put her hands on me, she didn't just cross a legal line. She revealed exactly who she is and what she thought she could get away with. Karen's attorney tried to downplay it all. She meant well. She was maintaining community standards. But the jury wasn't buying it, and neither was the judge. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Sentencing: 5 years probation, 18 months in county jail with no early release. Restitution of $14,000 to victims. Lifetime ban from holding any leadership position in community organizations. But what hit hardest, the judge's final statement: authority must come with accountability. Ms. Delaney, you did not protect your community. You preyed on it. That night, we held a neighborhood gathering. No uniforms, no false fines, just families, stories, healing. We called it the reunion we never got to have. Helen brought her wind chimes. We hung them from the trees in the park. The teenagers played guitar by the fire pit Karen once tried to ban. And Jules, she stood by the welcome table, shaking hands, answering questions, and smiling in a way I hadn't seen since she left D.C. People came up and said things like, "I didn't know I could say no. I thought I was the only one. I didn't think someone like me could stand up to someone like her." And that's what stuck with me. Karen didn't just abuse fake power. She relied on something deeper: our fear of conflict, our silence, our willingness to let small things go until they became something big, loud, and dangerous. But she lost because we spoke up, because my sister refused to back down, because the truth, when spoken together, drowns out even the loudest lie. Have you ever seen someone misuse authority in your community? Have you been told to let it go when something didn't feel right? Have you been silenced in the name of peace? Then now's your turn. Speak, share, question, act. Tell us what justice looks like where you live. What does community mean to you? Where do you draw the line between order and oppression? Drop your thoughts below, because sometimes the difference between right and wrong is who's brave enough to say something when no one else will. We did, and now so can you.